So, my name is Rose, also known as Knoxville Rose, and we are here with the Temple of Mott Ceremonial Witchcraft. And today's lesson is going to be about the elementals of occult philosophy. And these are actually really prevalent in literature across the Western mystery tradition. But today we're going to talk about specifically Cornelius Agrippa's work, the 3 books of occult philosophy that outline basically what are almost like elemental monads for magical work. So I also want to briefly mention that this type of curriculum is available in a membership that I have on Patreon called Dancers of the Circle. It's Temple of Mott Ceremonial Witchcraft. And the idea with this particular membership, and many of these teachings will filter through to these free classes, is any type of topic or subject that you might encounter in an outer order or an outer circle, or in the beginning, the outer order basically versus the inner order of either a coven, a ceremonial group, a more organized discipline, formal kind of training situation. So I have been both in the path of ceremonial magic and been on the path of witchcraft. Going back, my practice started really seriously in about 1989. And I actually started both paths at the same time. So now you can kind of see where I've ended up with ceremonial witchcraft. And I'm very much a ritual junkie. So I do a lot of ritual. And in the process of teaching, I like to present it in such a way that you'll be able to take it to your own personal practice and adapt it to suit your needs, to suit your particular spiritual connection to these elemental energies. So I think that we're all familiar with the magical circle. I'll share my screen for just a second. So in an elemental ritual circle that most of us start with when we start either in a coven or in like Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, or any of the kind of similar Rosicrucian-based groups, they start with pentagram magic or working with the pentacle. So you've probably heard of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. If you are Wiccan or into witchcraft, you've probably heard of the guardians of the watchtowers, which, by the way, is borrowed terminology borrowed from the Enochian tradition. So almost all of us have come into some system, even if we're doing solitary work like that outlined by Cunningham and solitary Wicca. We're all working with these elemental energies in the outer order. It's very, very common. So ideally, then we want to learn to balance earth, air, water, and fire internally, and to be able to deal with those energies in our external world. And when you've come to a point of advancement where you're ready to go into the inner order, you should be at a point then where you are the magician. You do have, your wand, cup, sword, and salt. External alchemical symbols are also internalized within. That's the whole basis of working with these elemental natures. So in that regard, they are natures. So let's talk a little bit about that first before we go into the specific entities that I'll be talking about today. So in the East, most traditions within the Western mystery tradition, so I'm going to stay in under that umbrella, most teaching institutions in that tradition will use East is the air, South is the fire, water is the West, and Earth is the North. And of course, that then translates into all kinds of correspondences. East is mind, South is will, water is heart, North and the earth are body. We have all these particular attributes that come with each quarter. So we have kind of a wide range of what we can work with. So if you step into an elemental circle, there's nothing wrong with just invoking the pure element. I invoke the pure element of air to attend this magic rite. I invoke the pure element of fire to attend this magical rite. Because it really boils down to your particular connection to those elements. So we'll talk a little bit about the work that I've done mixing this ceremonial aspect of using Agrippa's 4 elementals into a natural practice as well, not just a ceremonial practice. So let's take a look at what those are. And this is kind of the bulk of what we're talking about today. So we already get the 4 sacred elements from Agrippa, from those 3 occult books. So obviously those have had a huge impact on whether you are a witch, whether you are a pagan, whether you are a ceremonial magician, whether you are agnostic, even on the shamanic tradition. And in fact, this leans more towards the type of energies we use when we're talking about connecting to other worlds and astral landscapes. So let me just kind of briefly go through the technical, we'll say the rote portion of this. So Earth is associated with gnomes. So that would also include like trolls and brownies and, fantasy creatures, cryptids, if, because there is a whole line of magical occult current that is now going that direction as well. Bigfoot, gnomes, earth creatures. So that also means that they present with a very alchemical nature of cold and dry, and those types of places, perhaps. And they are ruled by what's called the president of the element or the ruler of the element, Gob. And then we have water, which is undines, mermaids, mermen, sirens, water creatures. And they are ruled by Nixa. And with fire, we have the salamanders. So any really fire creature. And I also put like fire dragons, iguanas, and other mythical creatures. This also works into the realm of myth, obviously, and folklore and spirits of the land. And of course, their ruler is Jinn. And yes, that same kind of energy that we're talking about with the Arabic Jinn as well. And then air, we have sylphs, who's ruled by Peralta. The president of the element is Peralta. Sylphs, sprites, Tinkerbell. So those are the types of energies that we are talking about. And you will find this, if you have a fae path, if your path is fairy, these particular entities that you can work with, these elemental energies that you can work with, can be really powerful in your practice. It really gets to the core of connecting to a pure elemental. So what do we mean when we say a pure elemental? We actually mean a pure elemental. We actually mean earth. We actually mean water, a being of water, a being of fire, a being of air. So how do we apply that? Well, we apply that several ways. We apply it with traditional correspondences, right? We can apply it if we are non-deist. This is a great way to work, because God then can become any manifestation of earth, any form that you choose to make of it. It can be, and in fact, you should use your imagination in these things. Or you can rely on folklore, whether it's Celtic, Welsh, Native American. All these traditions have these types of creatures. So the final thing I want to talk about after just introducing these names, these labels, is how to use them in both types of practice. So I'll start with talking about ceremonial magic. As I have exposed myself to this great world of social media, especially Twitter, I see a lot of people, even in the ceremonial magic tradition, who don't necessarily want to work with deities. They spend more of their time working with a lot of energies in the angelic realm, whether that's demons, daemons, but they have this, in other words, they're not going to go do their traditional LBRP where you call a god name at each quarter. They're going to want to use something else. So one of the things that works well if you are a ceremonial magician chooses not to use the god names, and you're not necessarily using a different pantheon of god names like I do in the Temple of Mot. These particular names, Gob, Nixa, Jinn, and Peralta, can be substituted for those quarters. The difference being, and this is kind of where we get between the Christian Gnostics that are good and the Christian Gnostics that are heretics, is normally, or actually I can do it better by actually reading a little bit. I'm going to show you a book here This is called A Treatise on Angel Magic by Adam McLean. So to give you kind of a little bit of the traditional literature on it, the idea with using these for more animistic practices is because of a particular distinction in Gnostic magic. So when they're explaining, and there's a nice little chapter on here of nymphs, sylphs, pygmies, salamanders, other spirits, and they also talk about gnomes in this book. There was this idea that with God and with Adam, there are basically two lines of ancestry of spirits. There's those which come from Adam, which are the gross, and those that come from God, which are the sublime. So that's kind of became a larger and larger distinction, leading, so ideally somebody working on the left-hand path, these are going to work in much better, simply because they represent that the matter side of the equation. In the Temple of Mott, what we're trying to do is say matter is sacred as well, and these are states of awareness. So there is no high magic, low magic aspect to that in Temple of Mott, but in traditional Christian magic, it is. This would be low magic because you're using the spirits of an ancestry from Adam, man, and not God. And let me see, I'll quote a little bit from the text. So flesh is twofold, flesh from Adam and not from Adam. Flesh from Adam is gross because earthy. But what flesh is not from Adam, it is subtle, not fit to be bound or comprehended. So you get the idea there. That's the distinction that comes in with the Christian Gnostic practice. And I kind of like this description too, so I'm going to read a little bit of this to you. Ian Bleekus saith, they are not men because they walk spiritually. They cannot be spirits because they eat, drink, and have flesh and blood. They are therefore a peculiar creature, and from their double nature they are made one mixture. And as any compounded matter of sweet and sour, or like two colors under one species. So in other words, man has a soul, and these do not. So for most of us that are in holistic magic, that's just like saying that the earth is not sacred. So, so while you can make this adjustment if you prefer to go non-deist and ceremonial magic practice, if you're doing witchcraft practice, I cannot tell you how much power and energy these allow you to tap into. And the mechanism behind that being that magical forms have an astral substance. So every time we like, whether we're creating a golem or creating a spell, we're creating a thought form on the astral. There's a substance to these things that we create. And the more that we empower those forms, this particular given forms, it's not just the more powerful they become, the more accessible their energy becomes. It's a stronger current. So when you have 200 years of magical practice, and each actually going all the way back to Agrippa, but 200 solid years of hermetic practice, focusing on these names of power of these elementals, they are really powerful to work with. That being said, it's great to make these changes, substitute Gob for Yotevah, or not Yotevah, for Shaddai, Adonai, Haaretz, in earth, or Gob. That's the earth versus the spiritual. But in reality, you're not going to truly experience these elemental natures until you're outside. And that is the real cool way to work with these particular entities or spiritual creatures. I consider them spiritual creatures. So one of my favorite things to do, and we're fortunate living in the area that we do, especially in the summer when you can go up to the mountains, right? So you've got this earth element all around you. Go stand on a rock in the middle of a river of water underneath a sun and feel that beautiful breeze just coming from the water and from the environment. And it can be a very powerful thing to call on these particular entities out in nature. It's, in other words, I might go out and say, I invoke Gob, ruler of the gnomes and the brownies and the trolls. Bring me your earthy sense, bring me your stability, bring me your, and call them all at once and just stand there in the center of all those elemental energies. It's a very powerful experience. And part of that power is because of the Akashic record of these energies having such a strong current. Now, the cool thing is, with the ability to think like a human, you also can use your imagination. So, in a way, you're not as limited by images as you would be like if you were worshiping a specific deity out of order. So, what does the king of gnomes look like to you, or the queen of gnomes, if you prefer, or the ruler of gnomes? I like the more neutral terminology. What does that look to you? What does the djinn look like? A fire elemental. What does the pure fire elemental do? Is it a talking flame? So use your imagination. But like I said, the real power from working with these energies is to take it outside. And we have to consider that in ancient times, this was probably the case as well, that they practiced it outside. We got a latecomer, I'm sorry. I have to close that off. Okay. And hang on just a second. I am going to try to, there we go. So I want to kind of get back to faces here. Good to see you. So that's pretty much it. In a nutshell, in practical use, you can use Gob, Herald, and Jinn and Nixa to replace LBRP. And I kind of call this the work of restoring the goddess in the Temple of Ma'at, because what we're doing is we're saying to our own inner psyche that the earth is just as sacred. And part of the work with the Temple of Ma'at is dissolving that line between above and below. One is a giver, one is a receiver, and they're reciprocal. And so strengthening our terminology and how we use the energies is really crucial. So your intent is really, really crucial to these types of ritual experiences. So like I said, try an LBRP if you're an animist, especially if you prefer kind of to take that deist element out of it. Try doing your LBRP and Gob. And you don't even have to necessarily do the practice of intonation. You can say the name with power and just check it out. It may suit you, it may not. But of course, my biggest recommendation would be to go out somewhere where you have exposure to all four of the elemental natures in nature, in the immediate environment around you, and do something more like the Wiccan call to the quarters. Make up your own invocations, have your own visual image of what each of these four rulers of the elementals look like, and go with it. It's a great way to start your own personalized practice of magic. You could take the druid route and call on those elemental energies, and maybe call it an animal totem in the quarter as well, like a bear in the north, and Gob, ruler of the elemental natures of the trolls and the brownies, power of the bear, stability of the stone. Just be creative with it. That's the main thing with kind of giving you just the basic elements to work with. I do encourage you to look up all four of these names. You'll find various literature on them. You'll find some classical literature on them more than anything. And ask for the book, the 3 books of occult philosophy by Agrippa. While it's great to have, they have one in a very large paperback binding version that you can buy. But this is one of those books I probably would recommend that you buy digitally, simply because then you have an easier way to use it as a reference. And a lot of times tackling these older classics and tomes, I'm sorry, but most people are not going to sit down and read through page by page, even though, if you're geeky like me, you might be inclined. But especially a book like this, I encourage it being a resource to start out with. And then if you ever really kind of want to go through and read more in depth into the text, that's great. But it's best starting out as a resource because it has influenced so much of the magical practice of all Western mystery traditions, and that includes ceremonial witchcraft. Ceremonial witchcraft is much more likely to use a ritual calling on these rulers of the elements, even over deities in ceremonial witchcraft. So that's just a little bit of information for you. I'm going to stop the recording now in just a second. I'm going to ask one of our attendees today, who also is like me, has a particular type of spiritual path that means a lot to them, and these meetings are also for networking. I really want people to feel free to share kind of what they've got going on too. So I'm going to finish with letting Jason tell you a little bit about what he's doing in the spiritual community right now. And then we will close out. A recording of this will be available later with some additional context for some of the information in the video. And then I hope that you'll check out some more of the videos on this channel as they slowly get added from the Patreon content. And thank you so much. Jason, tell us a little bit about what you have going on. Hang on, let me get the... Okay, Jason, if you want to unmute.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I didn't know it was muted. I just started talking, and unless I'm doing a video, I never look at the camera. But I wanted to say that I appreciate it, because when you started to talk about it, I was like, oh, she's going to talk about salamanders and undines. And, I was like I am aware of it, but as a shaman, every shaman's different. We don't really have like a central core belief system.
Right.
But for me, the way that I approach all of those levels is to, we go within and then go to like the lower world, and then I go directly to those planes.
Right. And
so,
these are the planes that we're talking about with
right.
These elemental spirits. Right.
Absolutely. So I do know what you're talking about. It's just interesting to see it from a different angle.
Yeah.
But, because I don't, nothing has names there really. I mean, it's just, and as you said, the thing at the end that I really liked that you said was about imagination, because each person's individual experience and imagination is their projector to make whatever they're doing work. So absolutely use different names, use no names, use the same image, whatever. But whatever it is that you do, just keep doing the same thing, because the more you focus your energy on it, it becomes more real. I know what you're saying about, like with the astral substance, it does.
Right.
It does make things real. Like that is,
it gives it form
manifestation outside of like self-help talk. Like that's literal manifestation, because you're making it out of the ether,
Right. Exactly.
But, yeah. So I mean, just because we have different approaches or whatever, we're still going up the same mountain, so it's irrelevant.
I know, or down the same hill,
or whatever it is. Yeah, I didn't say but we're going the place in the direction nobody can see.
Right.
Yeah. But all my thing is, I've got a channel I've had for about a year now called Walking in Shadow, because the main thing that I do, like it's just my fun, is that I've always been very potent at removing negative entities out of people's houses or off of land or whatever. Like I'm not talking about ghosts, because I'm not gonna purge your grandfather or something,
Right. No, I know. I understand exactly what you're saying. There are entities that can be formed by even emotional currents that end up on that land.
Or they're attached to an item sometimes, or they're attached to a person that was sort of sloughed it off and left it and gone somewhere else. But nevertheless, it's just when you were talking about the mountains and using the water and the breeze and everything, I've got a video. The reason I bring it up is I have a video where I went somewhere, and in that case it was a succubus, and I don't deal with succubi or incubi because that's their problem. I don't really have a way. I don't really have a way to, I don't know you that well, so I can't really help you with that. But however, there was a land spirit there that had been there for a long time and was sort of like sickened by all the activity going on there. And I removed it and placed it into a pendant I have, and I went to Greenbrier. So one of the videos has me when you were talking about that part about being on a rock and the river and the breeze under the sun.
Right.
One of my videos, literally, I'm like, when I returned the earth spirit to the earth, uh, it was sort of like animal control or something, like removing it from the bad environment and
But
putting
the
it
same work we got to
into
do
a good
inside.
environment. Right.
Yeah.
So, but I know exactly that feeling. I would tell anybody, please, and whenever it's warm, go to Greenbrier, go up until you can pull out onto the where you can park right at the river
Oh,
and just walk into the river
I
and
go
you
up
will
to
be healed.
Tremont and I drop in the
Oh, do you?
river.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and just get up there real early and drop in the river. So
But you'll
and
have
so
to look at my site. I just like that YouTube algorithm, like, even though I've been around for a year, I've got like 100 and something videos. But I'm just not popular enough where even searching for it comes up. Like
well,
you
and
have to go,
they have
you know,
limitations as well. Like you have to have 100 members just to be able to go live.
I know. Yeah.
So they don't.
Now they did change
Yeah.
that. They did change that slightly to where you can stream without the subscribers. It's just they limit who it goes to. I don't know what that means,
I
but
don't either.
I like the limited something as opposed to the unlimited nothing that I was getting before. So
That's just also positive thinking, I might add,
yeah,
while we're at it.
yeah.
All
But
right.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
No,
you
that's
can.
okay.
I forgot you're recording still. My bad.
Well, no, but
I'll
they'll
wait till you're not
appreciate
recording.
learning this. So I just want to reiterate, Walking in Shadow is the name of the YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's the same as you've got on the Facebook page too, right?
It is. That's
Cool.
Facebook. The Facebook. I have a page for it that has the links or the videos on it. You can go to it there. It's just I don't have Instagram or Twitter, and I never will.
Yeah.
So
pick your
I just have
platform
to
and work
accept.
with it.
I accept the obscurity,
I say pick
It's
your
okay.
platform and work with it. So it's all good. So what I will do definitely, I'm just now getting into video editing, so we'll see how we do. I've been doing some tutorials, so this is going to be the guinea pig video.
A lot of people have to edit me because I will run on tangents. So
oh well, you're in good company.
good.
All right. Well, listen, I'm going to just for a second, I'll stop the recording and thank everybody that's watched, and hope you'll check out both Walking in Shadow and the Temple of Mott, which is now just starting to build up its video content. And thank you so much for being here on the four elementals of occult philosophy, as outlined by Cornelius Agrippa. And the last piece of advice: get the digital version because you'll want to use it as a resource first. Thanks for joining us. Check out the Patreon and see you next time.